And in the rest of the afternoon's program, we have 3 panels, all of which are offering concrete solutions and tactics for bringing healing and restoration to our ecosphere. So let's get started. Paula, have a seat.
We need one more chair.
There's a chair.
That's good.
Oh, all right. We'll get one more chair from outside. Let's keep them all the same. Jim, can you get another chair out there? So our first panel is on the topic of education. And this is Paula Phipps. She's part of our Biodiversity for a Livable Climate staff, relatively recent, but a very dedicated member. She has set up this panel to illustrate the ways that education can make can bring the message of eco-restoration to a bigger audience and broaden the message about the climate crisis. Paula is a teacher and a teacher of teachers, and she can set up the schedule for the panel. Engin Atasay is an assistant professor of education here at BCC, and he has a special interest in diversity of all kinds, which applies to culture as well as biology. And Professor Jim Corven teaches biology and organic and sustainable agriculture here at BCC, and he was telling me that he's always taught students about the value of soil carbon. The thing that's new is that now soil carbon and similar issues have become an urgent part of addressing global warming and climate change. Zoe Hansen works for the Marion Institute in a program called Grow Education in the New Bedford schools. And Rachael Furlong is a student here at BCC and member of Seeds of Sustainability, a student organization, and they have a number of active projects, including one on permaculture that I hope she'll tell us a little bit about. So, Paul, I leave it to you.
Good afternoon and welcome. I have one quick question. Could the farmers who might be here raise their hands, or the would-be farmers? Ah, okay. Wonderful. Okay, thank you. I want to talk briefly about the role that individual schools and entire school systems can play in helping to prepare children for climate change. I was going to tell you a bit about the Massachusetts standards for teaching science, technology, engineering, and math. And I'm just going to say very briefly that Massachusetts does have a set of standards out there to support the teaching of these subjects, but it's in a draft form, and they're looking for feedback for the next 2 years, this year and next year, on how they could improve the standards. And I think that it's very important for all of us who are educators. And I know that there's actually a new term that I've just learned in preparing for this panel called farmer educators, to play a role in encouraging the Massachusetts standards to bring models of outdoor education, a deeper understanding of the planet's biological processes, and actual restoration activities into the curriculum. So the final version of the standards will be set at the end of the 2015-2016 school year. So please look at those standards, see how the work that you're doing could inform it. Massachusetts has a history of providing national models. The early childhood national models were originally Massachusetts models. The special education national model was originally developed in Massachusetts. So we can do it for climate change. And I just want to say, let's take that on. Schools are not only important in teaching about climate change, they're also the best social system we have for helping children after an extreme weather event. One of the morning speakers called it acute events, and I like that term. UNICEF and the Save the Children Foundation have responded to many acute events: tsunamis, floods, mudslides, earthquakes, as well as war, responding to help children in particular in those situations, but whole communities. And what they have found is that getting kids back into a learning situation, however makeshift it might be, is very important. It normalizes life. It supports resilience and mental health. There's a wonderful children's book called Tsunami about two boys who survive a tsunami by climbing palm trees. When they come down, their village is gone, their father is gone, their home is gone. The whole community worked together, and obviously with the help of organizations like UNICEF, to rebuild. And the younger boy, 8 years old, was quoted as saying that the day that school reopened was the happiest day in his life. And I want to let you know that that's critical, not only there, but here. Because in this country, we've already learned the hard way that not being prepared for climate disasters has disastrous effects on children. When Hurricane Katrina struck New Orleans in 2004, thousands of children under the age of 5 were housed in the Superdome for weeks with strangers, with angry, frightened people all around them. Not being prepared for the possibility of an unexpected extreme weather event is not something that we should let happen. We have to start getting prepared. Schools weren't ready to take those children back for a very long time, except in the wealthier sections of New Orleans. And 5 years later, the school system itself reported that 40% of the children in the system had severe post-traumatic stress. Really affected their ability to learn and their behavior. So this was also an equity issue. Children from wealthier areas had a very different experience than children who came from poor and black neighborhoods. So I just want to remind everybody that it's very important in our emergency planning to assure equity as we build resilience into community responses to disaster. I wish the mayor were here, but at any rate. I've worked with children for many years as a teacher, a therapist, and a school director, and I have enormous respect for them. I know they're thinking about what's going on and trying to understand it in their own ways. We need to know more about what they're thinking and feeling. We need to prepare them psychologically for unpredictable climate and social extremes, and in so doing, we will better prepare ourselves. The hopeful message that this conference brings is that ecosystems can be restored, that every one of us can, as I have heard young children say, help the planet. Children who have the opportunity to be active, who know that what they're doing makes the earth healthy and productive, these children are more resilient. As educators, we can help make that possible. Actually, as communities, we can help make that possible. We can be proactive in helping future generations by teaching the science they need for understanding what's going on, the social skills they'll need to negotiate very trying circumstances, and hands-on opportunities to connect with the ecosystems they are a part of. Our panelists today bring perspectives and models of proactive education, and I'm very pleased that they're here with us today. So the first person who will speak is Dr. Atasay from the Education Department at Bristol. And, okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Paula. Can you guys hear me? No? Yes? Closer? Okay. I'm limited in my time with you, so I'm going to try to do a little reading as well as I'm talking. But in my work, I talk about democracy and how we can instantiate dialogues about democracy in education. And one way that I try to find new languages about democracy in education is a concern for the environment. I talk about ecoliteracy as a perspective to start talking about democracy, because the assumption that I pursue in my classes is that environmental degradation is not just a scientific fact, or it just doesn't have a degrading effect on the environment and nature, but it also is a social event. It has devastating effects on culture, on society, and how we treat each other as individuals. So I approach it from a very philosophical perspective. I am a philosopher of education, so I'm not probably offering a very concrete solution to how we can reverse climate change, but I offer a reconceptualization of how we treat nature. And I do that through ecoliteracy. And I pursue a historical approach to how we have addressed nature traditionally. And I'm just going to start reading. Ecoliteracy is a perspective where Western science and philosophy have grappled and continue to struggle with the question of nature versus culture. So ecoliteracy questions this dichotomy, why in the Western paradigm, Western discourse, we have this binary between nature and nurture as two dichotomous opposing poles. Ecoliteracy does this, it questions this in order to transcend in order to transcend nature by depicting nature as an obstacle out there to be tamed and conquered. So in the Western paradigm, we have this notion where we understand nature as a thing, as an object that we need to conquer, tame, or extract value. So I question this dynamic. Okay. This discourse, this Western discourse, not only objectified nature as a thing or resource to be extracted, but also ultimately commodified and commercialized nature for value and profit. This process of enclosure and degradation of nature as property and plunder for value was normalized as culture gained the work of purification from nature, resulting in the marginalization of different cultural approaches to community, nature, that are not oriented toward dependency of modern science, technology, and consumerism. So again, from the very beginning, I talk about how the environmental degradation is also a cultural degradation. It's a degradation of how we refer to culture, how we address nature as well. So we're left with a prevailing paradigm, which is the Western paradigm of monoculturalism. And I try to critique this in my classrooms. I try to bring a multicultural perspective, and through that multicultural perspective, I try to enlighten students to this monoculturalism that is so prevalent and oppressive. So ecoliteracy education is a biocentric approach driven by biophilia, which is the bond between all living things, which offers learners a convivial and democratic language to overturn this modern mainstream discourse about nature and culture. It is inherently invested in a multicultural social justice discourse, because what happens in the environment is inherently connected to how we have addressed environment, as well as how we have addressed different cultural groups in society. So it's a social justice discourse. By seeking to reestablish our connection with the earth, ecoliteracy emphasizes the connections of environmental devastation with social conflict. So in other sense, I try to bring in the question of democracy when we talk about ecology. Those are all ecological concerns are actually democratic concerns. Thus, declaring that social concerns cannot be isolated from environmental concerns, and vice versa. Protecting biodiversity of the planet is part and parcel of our democratic concern for preserving and enriching cultural diversity, democracy, and our dreams of peaceful earth democracy. And in my teaching, I'll give you an example of how this works in my teaching. I teach education classes, and I've done classes where we talk about multiculturalism and multicultural education. And I often have students who are a bit skeptical about bringing social issues, and those students are usually the ones who are going to be science teachers or math teachers. And they always ask me, Engin, you know, I'm just a science teacher. I'm just going to talk about science. I'm just going to talk about facts and objective formulas and so forth. And I always bring this new language, new venue of eco-pedagogy or ecoliteracy into science education. And I try to encourage them to incorporate a concern for the environment through a concern for culture and cultural diversity. One example that I always give to my science teachers is they can use who has access to clean water, what sort of food and consumptive habits we have, and what sort of ramification those habits of production, habits of consumption have on how we treat each other as individuals, as well as how we have organized our society. So I try to democratize the concern for science, technology, engineering, and math through an awareness about ecoliteracy, through an awareness about climate change and how we need to preserve biodiversity in order to instantiate dialogues about democracy and cultural diversity. So that's my little 5 cents into this topic.
So our next speaker will be Zoe Hansen from the Marion Institute.
It's actually Zoe Hansen-DiBello, but hyphens get pretty confusing, so it's fine. I run a program called Grow Education, which is through the Marion Institute, and I have the privilege of working with many different schools, families, teachers in New Bedford public schools. So the Marion Institute is a nonprofit umbrella organization. We have a variety of different programs, but Grow Education is just one of those that is local. The other major one, which I encourage you all to go to, is the Connecting for Change conference that the mayor mentioned in downtown New Bedford in October. So, which I used to do the youth coordination for that conference, which was lots and lots of fun, which kind of led me to this. So the way that climate change kind of fits into what I'm doing, and what has been touched upon by previous speakers today, but not really in depth, is the idea of fitting this topic into public education. So I would offer one of the solutions. A gentleman up there mentioned, how do we get the naysayers or the conservatives on the side of believing in climate change and seeing kind of the possibilities for innovation and where we need to go as a society to preserve ourselves and this planet, and really create an environment where we're all thriving. And I would say that for me, that is in public education. I am currently a PhD student at UMass Dartmouth for educational leadership and policy, and I see public education as a gateway to solutions for a lot of our struggles on this planet and amongst ourselves. But what I think I can add to this conversation a little bit is that I see creating gardens and playscapes and landscapes on public school grounds as a way to not only create biodiversity and restore ecosystems and the soil, but also to bring culture to the table. If we look around this room today, and I would say this is probably the case in a lot of situations where we're talking about climate change, there are a lot of white people. And that's just a fact. We need to diversify this group. We need to diversify the conversation, and we need to diversify our ways of thinking about climate change. I'm all about the science. I'm not a scientist, but I really respect it. I started off studying maritime science at the University of Connecticut. Now I'm in a totally different place. But we also need to look at indigenous knowledge. And for me, that's really exciting to look through our schools and in New Bedford, that indigenous knowledge that lies in our community that we just have to tap into. And I see public schools as a hub to tap into that cultural piece, because our residents, our cultural diverse residents, are within our student body. So a little bit about what Grow Education does. I essentially go into schools. Started last year with two elementary schools. This year we're in 6. Next year we have 5 on the waiting list that wanted to be a part of this year, but we didn't really have the capacity for that. And I work with cohorts of teachers to run a retreat basically they sign on for a year of heavy, intensive kind of programming and training with Grow Education. We start off with a retreat at Round the Bend Farm, which you will hear about later on this afternoon, which is phenomenal. It kind of brings the urban teachers out into this beautiful farmland where they just, their minds open up and they get inspired on a personal level about sustainability. That gets them fired up, ready for the fall. Then we hit the schools in the fall, and we have a workshop that is open to the community. We put a press release in the paper, we invite the families of the students and the teachers, and we come together and we co-create that garden. We envision what we want, we listen to what the parents want to grow, what they eat at home. This is, for me, it's not about kind of slamming the points of climate change. It's more about how do we co-create something where these natural solutions and this growth together bubbles up naturally. And that to me is where it becomes a real life changer. You know, the way you change someone's mind or shift someone's opinion is through the personal, and how much more personal doesn't get than your children. So this is a way, it's how the recycling movement happened. We put it into schools. It's great to change one opinion at a time, but we need to be systemic. We need to create systems of change, and along with creating those systems, create the individuals. So while New Bedford School District is the platform, each individual school is creating their own garden, their own message, their own culture. So then we hit ground, we break ground, we create these gardens. They act as hubs for growing food, for changing the landscape of the school, and for feeding hungry families. And bringing the families together in a space where they can connect with the teachers that teach their children and develop relationships where they are not just focusing around disciplinary issues or parent-teacher meetings, but this is a space where community can really grow in many different ways. The possibilities are endless. Adam Davenport is going to be joining me starting in March to really take the climate change and the soil restoration to the next level. I am not a farmer. I am a city girl from Providence, and I love people. I like the people part. I also love growing, but I have been known to kill a few houseplants. So I'm learning, and I am a learner in this process, and will continue to be. But so I would just share with you that my kind of roadway into all this is using food and gardens in public schools as a vehicle to kind of exchange this knowledge. And I'm going to look into that, the curriculum stuff. Again, if we get, I don't want to use the word indoctrinate, but kind of, if we get people on that level of education in elementary school, they grow up with this way of thinking. And rather than dealing with adults who are kind of stuck in their ways and afraid of change, which is very natural, I don't blame them for that, it's natural to be afraid of change. And climate change can be pretty scary to talk about, so some people just put up a wall altogether. But if we get them when they're 5, when they're 6, they're excited about innovation, they're excited about the possibilities that they can transform their world and make, they're still so optimistic. So if we can tap into that optimism and make them excited about things that we know are so heavily embedded in our future on which way it goes, I think we'd be in a better place. So that's my take.
Thank you, Zoe. So the next speaker is Jim Corven, who is known to many of you as part of the sustainability and organic gardening programs here at BCC.
Thank you very much. It's so nice to be here. See so many new faces. I talk to the same faces so many times in classes and meetings, but it's good to see new people showing up and different people that we haven't seen over and over again. I don't know if it's a reflection on my credibility, but it occurs to me that on my last couple of days, I've been reading a book. It's called The Lies My Teacher Taught Me. And as a teacher, I have to take that book very seriously because it's a very interesting book. How many people here have read that book? Yeah, it's really gets you thinking and churned up. The other issue is I relocated here 8 years ago to Bristol Community College. In my great wisdom, I came here from teaching at the University of the Virgin Islands. And as I look outside today, I think, what am I doing? You know. But actually, I'm glad to be here. It was a good choice, and I wouldn't change it. I'm glad to stick with it, as long as I can get back there once in a while. What I wanted to talk about is our program here and what we're doing and why we're doing it. Really, our sustainable ag program sort of is based on this concern that current industrial agriculture is based on extraction. It's not based on production. It's based on the extraction of oil, the extraction of soil, the extraction of resources, the extraction of social capital, and the emissions of all the bad things that we don't want emitted, whether it's carbon or pollution or erosion and so on. And so it's an agricultural system based on some assumptions that clearly we know today just aren't really correct and are not obviously sustainable. And we need to respond to that. We need to change that. Even though today most people who are in what's so-called conventional agriculture, I don't think it's very conventional or traditional, but industrial agriculture, say that that's the way you need to go to feed the world. Well, they've been going that way now since about World War II, and today 1 in 7 people in the world go to sleep every night hungry with no hope of getting more food. That's a failure. That's a terrible failure. Even though we know that they are producing twice as many calories as we need today. We are now today producing enough caloric food, this is just the calories, to provide the energy for 14 billion people. So there's not really a shortage of energy in our food production system. But clearly, if 1 in 7 people are going to bed hungry every night, something is seriously wrong with the whole food system. So we started thinking here, what can we do at Bristol Community College, at a community college? And I have to give credit that it was Nancy Lee Wood who brought up the idea of we need to have a new program. We need to take the lead in some educational initiatives. And her idea was, let's have a new degree in permaculture. You remember that? And of course I said, no. In my wisdom, I knew, no, not permaculture. I spent 2 weeks with a crazy old guy from down under, Bill Mollison, and took his course for a couple of weeks. And I thought, oh, not that. You know, that's not going to work. It's great. It's a good idea. It's got some great points. But so we discussed it a bit and came up with the idea of organic agriculture, which we now call sustainable agriculture, because it's a little bit broader in terms of what we talk about and what we include in it. And of course, today we include permaculture in it. We even have a course in permaculture, specifically a science course based in permaculture here on campus as part of the curriculum, and I'm very happy to see that happening. Our program is science-based, the science of agriculture that we teach, because we have a lot of science. I teach plant science as a botanist and do a lot of work with plants and soils and so on. And so we're trying to get students aware of the science behind it so they can do the problem solving and develop new ideas and new innovations on their own, prepare them to go out and do different things, whether it's farming, whether it's landscaping, whether it's in business, whether it's in marketing, processing, anything connected with the food system, and that's very diverse enterprise. But we want people to be prepared to critically approach those things and deal with them in productive ways, you know, that will support a more sustainable system. As was mentioned in the introductions, the practices, for example, that we've taught since forever in organic agriculture really are based on the soil. The soil is everything in terms of getting good yields, good production, good healthy plants for good healthy people. You can't have healthy people if you don't have healthy food. You can't have healthy food if you don't have healthy plants. You can't have healthy plants if you don't have healthy soil. And who in the world ever came up with this idea of using depleted, salinated, non-biological soil to produce food for people? It just there's a disconnect there that isn't making too much sense to most people anymore. So we have all these practices of putting organic matter into the soil, increasing the biological activity of the soil with compost, with mulch, with manures, with green crops, with rotational systems. All of these things we've been talking about for 40 or 50 years. In my case, nearly 100 years, it seems, of increasing the organic matter of the soil. There's almost no soils anywhere that are used agriculturally that can't use more organic matter of some form or other at some point. Well, now we've got this new issue. What is organic matter? Organic matter is carbon. That's what we're talking about really when we say organic matter. And now we're talking about carbon sequestration. So consistent with traditional organic agriculture, where we want to improve fertility, improve soil stability, improve productivity, improve quality of production, now it turns out all of those practices are exactly what we need today to get the carbon out of the air and back into the soil where it belongs, and where it will do us a lot of good and do us a lot of help in our food system. So it's a nice place to be in terms of what we're doing, to realize that what we've been doing all along was the right thing. We just need to do a lot more of it. And how do we get that happening is through our educational system. One way we get that happening is through our educational system. And not everybody has to go through school to become a productive farmer, but it's a good way. A lot of people in Bristol County area don't come from an agricultural background. They weren't raised on a farm like I was, for example, so by the time they're 15 years old, they're already very competent in what they're doing without ever having taken a course in agronomy. So they need some help. You don't go into a profession as complicated as agriculture, as demanding as agriculture, and sometimes as risky as agriculture without some good background, some good training and understanding. You can get that through education, you get it through experience, or hopefully a combination of all of those. So we now offer a certificate as well as a 2-year degree. That's a very innovative idea for a community college. Land-grant universities were founded in the 1800s to do just that at a 4-year degree institution, and they did what they were established to do for industrial agriculture, who essentially funded them. And today they're changing. They're realizing there's a difference. But community colleges, I think, are in a leadership role because we're a lot more flexible. We don't have the big institutional momentum that some of these other schools have, and we can start new programs, we can develop new ideas and go in new directions and get those students either out into the field doing their work or get them prepared to go on to more education at a 4-year institution or some other kind of educational structure. A lot of schools now have doctorate degrees in sustainable agriculture. That was unheard of when I went to college. They have master's degrees and doctorate degrees, PhDs in sustainable agriculture. And I think they've been pushed in that direction by the demand of people around the country. And that's some of my interest, is to see what these programs are doing. Those are the programs we're hoping to prepare our students for, so they can, those who want to get out into the field and do farming or do some kind of food production system work can do that, but those who want to get into higher education beyond 2 years can do it. They can do it at home, they can do it locally, much lower cost, of course, and maybe at no cost if things keep developing for community colleges the way we hope they will, but get them going in a pragmatic way. So that's what we're doing. I'm not going to get into our curriculum or courses, but you can imagine we have plant science and agricultural practices and so on, plus students have to have all the other courses that any college student is supposed to have to be a well-educated person when they leave school and go on in their profession. But we really owe a lot of thanks to Nancy Lee Wood, who kicked this off many, many years ago. And sort of pulled this all together and got this actually moving. So I'm very happy to be part of it. And I think it's a program that has nothing but growth in its future and improvement, and I hope I can be part of that. And I'm glad you're here to hear about it.
And our last speaker will be Rachael Furlong from the Seeds of Sustainability program here at BCC.
Hello, everyone. I am a very active member of the Seeds of Sustainability Club here located on the Fall River campus of Bristol Community College. And currently, we have 3 ongoing projects from last semester. Our first project is our divestment project. In addition to all the wonderful things President Sprague is doing on this campus, we would like to encourage Bristol Community College as well as the foundation to divest their funds from investments that exploit fossil fuels and reinvest them in, thank you. And reinvest in something that maintains the core philosophy of the college, having a sustainable agriculture program, as well as Seeds of Sustainability. We believe in stewardship of the land and responsibility for what happens to our planet. In addition to the divestment program, we also have our hydration station project. Currently on our campus, plastic water bottles and sodas are sold widely in vending machines and such, and Seeds of Sustainability is putting in an effort to sell stainless steel water bottles or give away stainless steel water bottles to people on campus to encourage sustainability, to lessen the waste on this campus. In addition, we would like to implement more hydration stations on this campus. Currently, we have 4, and many students don't even know about them. So we would like to also implement more of those. And our third project is our Permaculture Garden, and this project is led by Scott Peets. We would like to have a working permaculture garden here on campus. Unfortunately, it's kind of at a standstill due to the construction with the solar panels and such and the snow. But that project is in the planning stages. And lastly, we have our workshops that we do every Wednesday at 3 p.m. And those are a variety of topics from fermentation to make your own deodorant. And we also have discussions such as a raw milk discussion, debunking the myths of raw milk and how it is dangerous. In the future, Seeds of Sustainability would love to get involved with the elementary and middle schools and even Durfee High School to possibly spread education there and get a younger audience involved. And we would also like to get more into the satellite campuses as well, not just stay in the Fall River campus, but get New Bedford and Attleboro campuses involved as well. And lastly, being someone who is finishing up their sustainable agriculture degree here at Bristol Community College, I can touch upon the program and how amazing it really is. One class in particular, Food, Famine, and Farming in the Global Village, taught by Dr. Nancy Lee Wood, is the one class that really inspired me and encouraged me that this is really what I wanted to do. Through this class, you touch on topics such as peak oil, as well as topics include surrounding agriculture and the production of food, and this is the class that made me really want to get involved, attend conferences, be just very involved in stopping climate change and the ongoing climate change that is happening right now. And that is what I have to say. Thank you.
We're very short on time. Our plan was that the panelists would have a chance to actually ask each other questions, and then we'd give the audience a chance to ask questions. I'll try to do that in a really, really quick time frame, but let's see if there are there any questions that you have for one another?
I'd like to hear from the audience.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, then for the audience, I'll suggest 2 things. One is questions for the panel, and the other is if you have, as the farmers in particular, work that you're already doing with schools, that would be wonderful to hear about too. Okay. So, questions from the audience.
I have a comment, and that is that in the concept of ecoliteracy, and also in the concept of encouraging young persons in the elementary grades to become ecoliterate, that we not forget that that there is a very important concept in all of education that I think we're not quite achieving, and that is to be certain that we inculcate the skills in science, technology, engineering, and math, because if we don't do that at the earliest levels, then the concepts of ecoliteracy will be fallow because they won't be effective in a very complex society that they're going to find themselves as members. And so STEM is extremely important in terms of educational outcomes. By the way, here at this institution, we find in the need for developmental courses because at the earlier levels, and this is not nice to say publicly, that is not happening. And students arrive without the essential skills in science, technology, engineering, and math, and it's a matter of their learning what they should have learned way back then. So we have to be very careful that we don't move into the soft information without the hard science, technology, engineering, and math skills.
Thank you.
Can I respond to that? I don't need a mic. I agree. I think there's a lot of focus among elementary level of STEM. In fact, STEM is kind of taking over the whole discussion in a lot of different spheres. You see acting slip away from schools. You see humanities slipping away. I would say they're equally important. With only STEM and no humanities, the humanities teach us to have compassion for one another. I think that can happen through a garden. I think that but I agree with you. I think that we're all scientists from the beginning, and somewhere along the line, that it gets pushed out of us, that we're not interested in the world around us, we're not innovative thinkers, we're not engineers, and we're told, or students are told, that's not you, okay? Like you're not capable in certain situations. And so I think we need to encourage all of it, and it's very important. But the conversation's happening a lot. STEM, charter, STEM.
Teach the whole person.
Teach the whole, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Actually, some places, Cambridge being one of them, have changed the acronym to STEAM, and the A is the arts and humanities. And so certainly, you can teach about climate change as well as the science through literature. And there are many other parts of the curriculum where it can happen.
Can I add something? I think an ecoliteracy perspective.
Hold on, excuse me. Yes, I know people can hear.
Oh yeah. Yes. So I should use the mic. I think one of the important aspects of ecoliteracy is that it's not against science, but it's against science that's not convivial, it's not democratic, that doesn't stem from a concern for society. So I think in that perspective, ecoliteracy is more democratic as opposed to pursuing science for the sake of science, but replacing that social dynamic or paradigm with science for society as opposed to science for the sake of science.
Science is apolitical.
Yeah, so politicizing.
Otherwise it's not science.
Well, that's the traditional Western paradigm that claims that. Yeah, and that has been very destructive. Yeah. So ecoliteracy is a way to overcome that Eurocentric. Yeah. Yes, scholars.
Eco-justice too.
Yeah.
The eco-justice and
Yeah.
eco-literacy is the equation.
Do you want the mic?
No.
Okay. That's my little comment.
We have a question up here.
Hi. Educators now have been cycling through. New educators stay in for about 4 years, 5 years, and then they're exhausted by the new teaching mechanisms, the Common Core. How are we able to develop good eco-literacy educators without the sort of ability to give them the freedom to teach to their strengths?
Oh, wonderful question. I think that that's a tough one. I anticipated a lot of roadblocks in New Bedford for that reason. That Common Core is kind of, as teachers would say, is kind of strangling their abilities to really teach, and their ability to be creative in the classroom. they're finding a way around it, even though New Bedford is, as a district, under immense pressure. And this, we're in a turnaround situation. I don't even like that term. But they're finding a way to work it in. I meet with central administration, and the superintendent is actually very supportive in seeing outdoor classrooms and outdoor learning as like kind of relative reality pedagogy, and that making it real then helps kids retain that information and help it resonate, which then makes them perform better on a test.
Project-based
Unfortunately-
learning?
Huh?
Project-based learning?
Project-based learning, but also, for example, 2 years ago on the MCAS was a question about community gardens. And third graders were expected to respond in a written response envisioning their community garden. They failed that question miserably because they have no context for it. So standardized testing, actually, I'm against it. I'm against high-stakes testing personally. But I believe that they are kind of shifting towards these questions that actually work in my favor when making arguments to why we need to incorporate this type of learning across the board. So does that answer your question? Kind of. I mean, it's through clubs. I think it's just a personal teacher and the principal, the local administration inside the school, they run the show, really. They answer to higher ups, but they can control their climate if they want to within the school boundaries. I don't know if that answers. Sorry.
It's a difficult question, but it's a curiosity that I have.
And it's place-based. It depends where you are, I think.
And some school systems are also increasing tremendously what's called out-of-school time activities, and a lot of science is starting to come in, developed by after-school programs that aren't necessarily run by the city, but that are part of a city structure. That can happen. I think, I'm sorry to say, one more question. Yes.
It's a real comment. I mean, it's a little comment, but I have to bring in Rachael Carson. I would feel derelict if I did not. And unfortunately, I fortunately heard somebody say at 5, if you don't get them at 5 or 6. I have, after 40 years of taking children to nature and nature to children and getting the wow of discovery of kids from ages 4 to 18, I have a 5-year-old grandson who's in an all-day kindergarten doing the Common Core all day and has not done any exploration in science since day 1 of kindergarten. There is only math and there is reading and sight words all day, every day. So I'm very encouraged what I hear here. I wish he were in New Bedford.
I am in New Bedford.
As I say, I wish that he were in New Bedford.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm glad it's moving, hopefully. Thank you.
I just came in. Can I quick say 4-H? Please consider 4-H and Massachusetts Envirothon and also an environmental science homeschool style. So this was the education session, right?
Right.
I was doing a class.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you.